Ever looked at a really long Spanish word and just felt, I don't know, like it was a secret code you couldn't quite crack? Like
Yeah,
there's this hidden logic, maybe, that everyone else gets, but you're still trying to piece it all together?
I think a lot of learners feel that way, definitely.
Well, you're in exactly the right place today because we are putting on our linguistic x-ray specs.
Oh,
We're going to try and demystify the sometimes complex architecture of Spanish vocabulary, turn those head-scratching moments into hopefully some satisfying moments.
that's the goal.
So our journey into this fascinating world of Spanish word formation, it's guided by a really excellent source. Prefijos, interfijos y sufijos. It's by Dulce from the fantastic YouTube channel Español con Dulce.
Vilce's work is great.
It really is. And this isn't about, just memorizing endless vocabulary lists. It's more like a shortcut, a kind of master key for Spanish language learners like you to unlock how words are actually built and, crucially, how you can understand meanings, even if you've never, ever seen a particular word before.
That's absolutely right. And what's truly transformative about getting a handle on these fundamental building blocks, it isn't just some academic exercise.
Right.
It's really about gaining a deep, almost intuitive grasp of the language's internal logic.
Okay.
When you can spot these components, you're not just like passively memorizing things. You become an active decoder.
I like that. Active decoder.
Yeah, you can infer meanings, you can anticipate nuances, and it really speeds up your progress. It's about demystifying what can, at first, feel like just an overwhelming flood of new words.
Makes sense.
And for those of you who want to dive even deeper, Dulce has actually provided a free PDF of the source material. It's got exercises you can follow along with.
Oh, that's useful.
Yeah, just check the link in the description for that.
Perfect. Okay, let's unpack this linguistic puzzle then. We're starting our journey right at the very beginning of words with prefixes.
Okay, the starting point.
Now, you probably have a general idea of these from English, right? They're those little bits stuck on the front of a word. But what makes them such a powerful tool in Spanish beyond just their position? What's the big insight here?
What's really interesting is their kind of dual impact. First, they always attach directly to the base word. They form one solid unit, no spaces, nothing like that.
Okay, one unit.
And, crucially, while they dramatically alter the meaning of the word, they don't actually change its grammatical category.
Ah, okay. That's important.
It really is. So if you add a prefix to a noun, guess what? It's still a noun. Like ex-presidente, ex-president. Still a person, still a noun.
Right.
Added to a verb, it stays a verb. This makes them incredibly powerful, almost like surgical modifiers. They tweak the meaning precisely.
That distinction is so useful. It means you're not learning a whole new word type, just a different shade of meaning.
Exactly.
Let's look at some examples from our source because this is where you can really see their power in action. How about the prefix anti?
Okay, anti.
Its meaning is all about opposition. The source uses anticonceptivo, which, literally means something to avoid conceiving. You immediately get that sense that anti means going against something.
Mhm.
So how does understanding just that little anti help you figure out words like, say, antibiotico or anti-natural, even if you've never formally studied them?
Well, it creates a sort of foundational understanding, doesn't it? Almost like a mental keyword.
Yeah.
Once you grasp anti means against, you instantly connect antibiotico to being against biotic life, bacteria,
Right.
or anti-natural to being against what's natural. This pattern recognition, it's a huge step in building that intuitive vocabulary, that kind of mental map where things start linking up.
A mental map. I like that.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have in and its cousin im, both meaning negation.
Right, the not prefix.
The source gives us inútil, literally not useful, and impossible, not possible. Now, I always just kind of thought I had to memorize which one went where. Is there a trick or a reason why both in and im exist for basically the same meaning? This feels like something that could really help learners.
That's a fantastic question. And no, it's not arbitrary at all. There's a really clear phonetic rule in Spanish.
Oh.
Yeah, in becomes im when it comes right before a word starting with P or B.
Ah.
So you get impossible because possible starts with P.
Oh.
And maybe imborable, unirascible, because borable starts with B.
Right, I see.
It's purely about making the word easier and more natural to pronounce. Knowing that simple rule just makes spelling and pronunciation so much more predictable. Saves a lot of guesswork.
That's incredibly helpful. So it's all about the sound, how it flows. Okay, next up we have pre. which consistently signals anteriority or basically before.
Pre, yeah.
Yeah.
Very common.
The example pre-calentar is perfect. It means to heat before, something you do often in cooking. You instantly know what that means, right?
Mm-hmm. Preheat.
And you can see how it plays out. In other words, like predisser, to say something before it happens, so predict. Or prehistoria, the time before recorded history. It's so consistent.
That consistency is absolutely key. Once you grasp pre, it really is like finding a master key. You don't just learn pre-calentar, you unlock this whole category of words that share that predictable before meaning. It genuinely rewires how you approach Spanish vocabulary.
Okay, makes total sense. Then there's which can mean repetition, or, and this surprised me a bit, intensity.
Ah, yes. It's got that dual function.
Really leer. The read again, that's a clear example of repetition.
Yeah.
But then it can also add intensity, like the example requemar, which means to overcook or burn thoroughly. It's not just cook again, it's cook really intensely. That feels like a real aha moment when you realize it can do both things.
And that nuance is critical. Usually the context tells you if it's repetition or intensity.
Right.
But just understanding that both possibilities exist, expands your interpretive range quite a bit. So if you accidentally requemar your dinner,
which I might,
you haven't just, cooked it again slightly. You've really burnt it.
Good to know for future kitchen adventures. Okay, finally for prefixes, let's look at sub, meaning inferiority or below.
Sub, okay.
Not underneath.
Submarino, literally under the sea. That's a great, clear example. But think also of subrayer. To underline something, you draw a line below the text.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or subcampion, the runner-up, who ranks below the champion.
Absolutely. So the really powerful takeaway here, I think, is that simply by training your eye to recognize these common prefixes, anti, in, pre, re, subre, you gain this massive shortcut.
Yeah.
You start understanding countless Spanish words, even ones you haven't explicitly learned before. You're not just memorizing vocabulary anymore. You're actually building a mental framework. A framework.
Yeah, one that lets you infer and deduce meanings on the fly. It's incredibly empowering for a language learner. It gives you that X-ray vision for words we were talking about.
That X-ray vision. I love it. Okay, that makes so much sense for prefixes, the parts that kind of lead the way. But what about those curious little bits that sometimes pop up right in the middle of a word?
Yes.
Let's talk about interfijos. Our source notes, they're less common and maybe a bit more mysterious. So what are these interfijos all about? And why do we even need them if they're not actually adding meaning? That almost feels like an unnecessary complication.
That's a really good question, and it touches on, the subtle beauty of how language evolves. Interfijos are these little particles placed between the root of a word and a suffix.
Okay, in between.
And as you said, they don't have their own inherent meaning. Their job is basically just to help unite those two elements, the root and the suffix, or sometimes just to soften the pronunciation, make the word flow more naturally off the tongue. Think of them as silent glue words. They're particularly common when you're forming new nouns and adjectives from existing words, like deriving baker from bake in English. Sometimes you need something in between.
Glue words. I really like that analogy. That makes it much clearer. Let's look at the examples from the source to really see them, doing their job.
Okay.
First, carniceria. You've got the root carnia, meat, then this interfijo, i.e., and finally the suffix, seria. And that word means the place where meat is sold, a butcher shop.
Right.
So without that little I, you'd have carniceria, which it just doesn't sound quite right, does it? It feels a bit clunky.
Exactly. Or take the other example, panadero.
Okay.
Here, the root is pan, bread. The interfijo is a, and the suffix is adero. That gives us the person who makes bread, a baker.
Right.
Again, try saying pandero without that a. It sounds different. And actually, pandero is a completely different word. It's a type of tambourine.
Oh, wow. So the interfijo prevents confusion there, too. So it's really about making the language flow better, not adding hidden meaning.
Precisely. It's often about phonetic flow, making words roll off the tongue more smoothly. Maybe breaking up awkward consonant clusters, or just following established sound patterns in Spanish.
Okay.
And this raises that important question for you as a learner. How does knowing about interfijos actually help if they don't add meaning?
Yeah, what's the practical benefit?
Well, it helps you avoid confusion. If you're trying to dissect a word, knowing that a certain syllable in the middle might just be an interfio helps you correctly identify the true root and the true suffix.
Ah, I see.
It stops you from misinterpreting the meaning by thinking that little connector adds something it doesn't. You learn to kind of filter out the glue and get straight to the real substance of the word.
That's brilliant. It's like knowing which parts are just structural support versus the bits that carry the actual meaning. Okay, fantastic. Now, let's move on to what feel like the most transformative elements.
Sufijos.
The endings. Yes, the endings. These are the particles placed at the end of a word, and they are incredibly powerful. They can change a word's meaning, its grammatical function, even add really specific nuances. This is where I personally start seeing words totally differently.
You're absolutely right. Suffixes are real game changers. Our source actually breaks them down into 3 main types, and each one has its own incredible impact on how we understand and use words.
3 types. Okay.
First up, we have sufijos apreciativos. These are interesting. They don't change the core meaning so much, but they express things like size or affection or sometimes even disdain or negativity. Think of it as adding an emotional or size-based layer to the word.
Emotional layer. Interesting.
Yeah, the most common ones you'll see are ito or ita for diminutives.
Ah, ito. Everyone loves ito.
Exactly. Take gato, cat, becomes gatito. Now, it means little cat, sure, but it almost always implies affection, like cute cat or dear little cat. It's often more about feeling than just physical size.
Right, it adds that warmth.
Definitely. And then on the other end, you have on or ona, which are augmentatives, making things bigger. The example casa, house, becomes casoto, a big house.
Big house.
But these suffixes can also sometimes imply clumsiness, or maybe a larger, simpler version of something. Like cabezon means big-headed, literally, but it also usually implies someone is stubborn.
Ah, okay. So it's not just bigger, but often carries another connotation, like big and maybe a bit unwieldy, or big and affectionate, or even big and stubborn. That's a really great nuance to grasp.
Precisely. Okay, second type, sufijos derivados. Now, these are perhaps the most exciting for vocabulary building because they create entirely new words, often changing the word's grammatical category or creating brand new concepts.
Okay, creating new words, like what?
Well, the suffix idor or idora often indicates a profession or sometimes a tool or place related to an action. Our source example is pescador, a fisherman.
From pescar to fish.
Exactly. Someone who fishes, it connects directly to the action. Think also of trabajador, worker from trabajar, to work.
Okay, yeah. Very useful.
And another common one is ista, which denotes a person related to a particular activity, profession, or even an ideology, like guitarrista, someone who plays the guitar,
Gotcha.
Or artista, someone who creates art, or dentista. These are incredibly useful for expanding your vocabulary around professions, hobbies, roles, all sorts of things.
That's super helpful for building professional vocabulary, definitely, linking people to what they do. And then the third type, which most learners will probably recognize because they're so fundamental to the language, sufijos gramaticales.
Yes, these are the absolute basics, the ones you need from day one. They indicate fundamental grammatical information.
Like gender and number.
Exactly, like A or O for gender, as in niño, boy, and niña, girl.
Right.
Or S or Es for plural, like casa becomes casas, houses.
Got it.
And of course, all the verb endings that tell you who's doing the action and when, the conjugations for ether, air verbs. Though our source focuses a bit more on the other suffix types today.
Right, those grammatical ones are essential, but maybe less about creating new meanings. Let's look at some other common examples of suffixes from the source and their varied impact.
Okay.
How about al? It can mean relation or sometimes place. Floral means something related to flowers. And hospital, well, that's an establishment, a place for treating the sick. It really transforms the root's meaning to describe a place or a characteristic.
It does. Or how about oso or osa? This one often conveys abundance of something.
Abundance,
Like hermoso means beautiful,
right.
But you could think of it as full of beauty.
Ah, okay.
Or poderosa means powerful, literally sort of full of power.
Yeah.
It adds that strong sense of lots of whatever the root is.
That makes sense. Full of, and my personal favorite, maybe because it's so direct, is emente.
Ah, the adverb maker.
Exactly. This one means mode, and it basically turns adjectives into adverbs. Rapid quick becomes rapidamente, quickly. It's just like adding insly in English, isn't it? Like rapidly. So intuitive once you see the pattern.
It really is. And what's truly fascinating here, stepping back a bit, is how suffixes don't just add a tiny nuance sometimes. they can completely shift a word's grammatical category.
Hmm.
From a verb to a noun, like pescar to pescador, or an adjective to an adverb, like rápido to rápidamente.
Yeah.
Or they create a whole new concept. If we connect this to the bigger picture for you, the learner, mastering these sufijos unlocks a truly vast amount of vocabulary.
Right.
You're no longer just memorizing individual words in isolation. You're starting to understand the underlying system that generates them. And that allows you to create and comprehend new words much more effectively. It moves you beyond just rote memorization into, well, closer to true linguistic fluency.
That's a powerful point. It really is like discovering the genetic code of words or something.
Yeah.
And this leads us perfectly to the grand finale, the art of combination.
Putting it all together.
Exactly. Our source brilliantly highlights that these elements, prefixes, interfijos, suffixes, roots, they often combine in ways that might seem complex at first, but are actually incredibly logical. This is where you really see the true architecture of Spanish words, how they're built, like layer by layer.
And the examples provided in the source illustrate this layered construction perfectly. Let's take the word increíblemente.
Okay, that looks long.
It does look long, maybe a bit intimidating, but with our new X-ray vision, we can break it down piece by piece. First, the prefix in. What does that mean again?
Negation.
Exactly, negation. Then you have the root, or the base word here, creíble, which means believable.
Believable. Okay.
And finally, that suffix we just talked about, creíble. What does that do?
Turns it into an adverb, like pleo.
Precisely. It indicates mode or transforms it into an adverb. So putting it all together in, not, plus creíble, plus clavel, plus montel in a way. Increíblemente means not believably, or simply incredibly. Each piece just slots in perfectly. And a word that seemed maybe opaque suddenly becomes transparent once you see the components.
It's like seeing the blueprint of the word right there. Okay, and then there's panaderia, which we touched on earlier when we discussed interfijos. That also beautifully combines elements, doesn't it?
It really does. Let's break that one down too. You start with the root pan.
I've read.
For bread. Then you have the interfijo. Oh, what's its job?
The connector, the glue, just helps it sound right.
Exactly, the silent connector, making it flow phonetically. And finally, the suffix eria. What does that often indicate?
A place, like an establishment.
Perfect. A place or establishment where something is made or sold. So put it together.
Yep.
Pan, bread, plus a connector, plus area.
Yeah.
Place. Panaderia, the place where bread is made or sold. The bakery.
Simple when you see it like that.
These examples truly show that even words that look long or complex usually follow these consistent logical patterns. It's not just chaos, it's actually a beautifully ordered system.
Precisely. And once you train your eye and your ear to spot these components, the prefix, the root, maybe an interfijo, the suffix, even a long, totally unfamiliar word, can start to make sense. It genuinely is like having X-ray vision for words, allowing you to quickly grasp its core meaning and how it functions in a sentence. It's empowering. So let's try and summarize our deep dive today into prefijos, interfijos, y sufijos, guided by Duce from Español con Duce.
Okay.
Prefixes. They modify the meaning right at the beginning of a word, but they don't change its grammatical category.
Sure.
Interfijos, those subtle silent connectors, the glue words, often sitting between the root and a suffix, mainly there for phonetic flow, making things sound better.
Got it, the glue.
And sufijos, placed at the end. These are the real powerhouses. They can totally change a word's meaning, shift its grammatical category, or add specific nuances like size or emotion.
Absolutely, the transformers.
Right. And together, understanding these elements truly enriches your vocabulary and deepens your understanding of how Spanish words are actually built, turning that potential confusion into clarity, those aha moments.
Definitely.
Our entire goal for this deep dive was really just to provide you with a powerful shortcut, a way to get well-informed about Spanish word construction, turning what might seem like just a jumble of letters into clear, comprehensible insights. We really hope you feel that linguistic superpower starting to activate.
Yeah, and remember, knowing these building blocks isn't just about collecting more vocabulary words. It's really about developing an intuition for the language.
An intuition.
Yeah, a kind of internal logic detector that will serve you throughout your entire Spanish learning journey. So here's a thought to take away. What other words can you now dissect and understand just by recognizing these prefixes, interfijos, and suffixes?
Good question.
We really encourage you to start actively looking for these patterns in your everyday Spanish interactions. Whether you're reading something, listening to a podcast, watching a show, or even trying to speak. you'll probably be amazed at how much you can start to infer and how much more confident you'll feel as a result.
Absolutely. That's a great challenge for everyone listening. Thank you so much for joining us on this fascinating linguistic journey today.
My pleasure.
And a huge shout out again to Dulce from Español con Dulce for providing such clear and really insightful source material that made this deep dive possible.
Here.
And don't forget, you can download that free PDF she provides to practice with the exercises she mentions. Just follow the link right there in the description. Keep learning, keep exploring those word structures, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.